Ose shalom bimromav.
Page
Hu
62.
ya'aseh shalom
At the bottom. 62 at the bottom.
Ose shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. Ose shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. Ya'aseh shalom. Ya'aseh shalom. Shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom. Ya'aseh shalom. Shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael. Oseh shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. Oseh shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. Oseh shalom bimromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu. Ya'aseh shalom. Ya'aseh shalom. Shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom. Ya'aseh shalom. Shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael.
Ve'al kol Yisrael. Bring it on. Bring on that shalom. We can all use it. And as well, we can use healing. And, you know, I'm still coughing and gagging, although thank God I'm not on this list anymore. But just before I logged off tonight, I got an email from my colleague in Hoboken, Rabbi Rab Scheinberg. I shot him an email before Shabbat, and he told me that just 2 hours ago he tested positive, and he was offloading all his Shabbat and Shavuot responsibilities. So there are a lot of people hurting. A lot of people need prayers for healing. So we're on page 253. We're going to offer that Mishaberach L'cholim for healing of body, spirit, psyche, self, relationship. And we'll call out those names between the stanzas as we do.
Mishaberach avotenu mikol habracha limotenu. May the source of strength who bless the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen.
This week we're especially praying for Millie Rottenberg, Howard Simon, Gloria Berkowitz, Gittel Bat Chana, Bernice Portney, Beryl Ben Sima Vishmuel Leib, Steve Gellis, Shalom Avram Ben Goldave Shayahu, Michael Rosenblum, Harav Miriam Yael Chaya Bat Sarah Yitzchak, Maxwell Zwain, Menachem Mendel Ben Yehuditu Michael, Dora Monserrate, Dr. Isoka Nosemwota, Alan Mentha, Alon Ben Yael, Marlon Williams, Eric Rifchin, Bela Leah Bat Chaya Zelda V'chaim, Tessa Kushner, and Rhoda Alaribe. And to these names we add
Rosalind Eichenbaum. Bela. Shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Refuah Shlema, we wish them a full and complete healing uneventfully soon. And those who care for them as well. So Shabbat Shalom, I know why nobody is here is because everybody is resting up tonight for the all-nighter that everybody's going to pull tomorrow. Everybody knows that I'm part of a Tikkun Leil Shavuot. Tomorrow night is Shavuot, and I have joined with I don't know how many dozens of congregations in the country, and we're doing an all-nighter. Each rabbi from I don't know how many different congregations all over America is taking an hour. We start at 8 p.m. and this is all on Zoom and it goes all night. So by the time it gets too late for the East Coasters to teach, then the Central Time takes over and then the Mountain Time's over and it goes all night until 11 o'clock on Sunday morning. Just in time, because we're going to have Shavuot morning services here in Yizkor. So that's what's going to be going on here. And that's why everybody's resting up. Not to forget, of course, our Shavuot picnic and ice cream social right after the services. That's between 12 and noon, the picnic and ice cream social. So of course, we're reenacting and re-receiving Torah. So when we all stood at Mount Sinai, the tradition teaches us whether we were alive at that moment or not. Our neshamas were there, our souls were there. It used to be an old joke when it was an old pickup line. That when you saw somebody that you wanted to meet, you say, it's been so long. And she would look at you and say, I'm sorry, I don't think I know you. And you would say, of course, we met at Sinai. It's an old one, an old Jewish one. But in Torah, when you read about Revelation, when you read about Sinai, it's filled with this sensory intensity and filled with contradictions. The text says we saw the voice of God. We saw the voice of God. It was so quiet that not a dog barked or a bird chirped, yet there was thunder and the blasts of shofar. And then it's not really clear whether we received the entire Torah, the 10 Commandments, the first commandment, just the first letter of the first word of the first commandment, which of course is the Aleph, which is silent. Moses is on the mountain, then he's not on the mountain, then seemingly he's back up on the mountain. So you read it, and I'm sure it's quite consciously meant to be this synesthesia of feelings and sensory input that we don't make sense of it because it doesn't make sense. Of course, if we're all going to experience God, how would that be? It must be overwhelming. There are many, many stories that fill in the blanks of this seminal moment in our history. And my teacher, Rabbi Marshall Meyer, used to say, none of us know what happened at that time on Sinai. All we know is that from that moment on, the world was never the same. The moment that we received Torah, that Torah came into existence. The moment that we all had that, whatever it was, that moment, when we experienced the presence of the divine. The moment that we each received the entire Torah as if in like a Spock-like Vulcan mind meld specifically crafted for each individual for all time. Brought this because I want to read one of those legends from the Mechilta. If you're not familiar with the Mechilta, it is a commentary on the book of Exodus. It's quite old. We know that parts of it are at least as old as the Talmud, which is, 1700 years old. We know that there were probably parts of it that came later. It doesn't matter. It's old, believe me. And it's on the book of Exodus. And of course, is in the book of Exodus. This right here is one of 2 volumes of Louis Ginsberg, The Legends of the Jews. It's in English, which is amazing, and it's an amazing addition to anybody's library. It is sort of the greatest hits of rabbinic stories and collections spanning the thousands of years, Talmud, Mishnah, Midrash, more modern legends. But I'm going to read something that's from the Mechilta, which is kind of old. Figures. Oh, here it is. Good. And it's on the revelation, no surprise, at Mount Sinai. From the first day of the third month, that would be this month, the month of, what month is it? It's after ER. It's not Tammuz. Sivan, thank you. Sivan is the third month. The day that Israel arrived at Mount Sinai, a heavy cloud rested there, and everyone except Moses was forbidden to approach the mountain. Yea, they dared not even stay near it, lest God smite those who pushed forward with hail or fiery arrows. One day, or the day of the revelation, announced itself as an ominous day, even in the morning. For diverse rumblings sounded from Mount Sinai, flashes of lightning, accompanied by an ever-swelling peal of horns, moved the people with a mighty fear and trembling. God bent the heavens, moved the earth, and shook the bounds of the world, so that the depths trembled and the heavens grew frightened. God's splendor passed through the four portals of fire, earthquake, storm, and hail. The kings of the earth trembled in their palaces, and they all came to the villain Balaam and asked him if God intended the same fate for them as for the generations of the flood. But Balaam said to them, "Oh, you fools! The Holy One of blessing has long since promised Noah never again to punish the world with a flood. The kings of the heathen, however, were not quieted, and furthermore said, God has indeed promised never again to bring a flood upon the world, but perhaps God now means to destroy it by means of fire." Balaam said, "Nay, God will not destroy the world either through fire or through water. The commotion throughout nature was caused through this only, that the Holy One, there's a typo in here, that the Holy One is about now to bestow the Torah upon God's people. The Eternal will give strength to his people. Adonai oz le'amo yiten, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. May the Eternal bless his people with peace. And each one, quieted in spirit, went to his house. And just as the inhabitants of the earth were alarmed at the revelation and believed the end of all time had come, so too did the earth. She thought the resurrection of the dead was about to take place, and she was going to have to account for the blood of the slain that she had absorbed, and for the bodies of the murdered whom she had covered. The earth was not calmed until she heard the first words of the Decalogue. Although phenomena were perceptible on Mount Sinai in the morning, still the Holy One did not reveal God's self to the people until noon. For owing to the brevity of summer nights and the pleasantness of the morning sleep in the summer, the people were still asleep when God descended upon the mountain. By the way, this is the reason that we have a Tikkun Leil Shavuot. Tikkun means a repair. This idea that the people were sleeping through all of this, right? They wanted to sleep in. There was all of this. The kings were freaked out. The earth was freaked out, right? There was trembling. It was going on. And where were the Jewish people? They were told 3 days in advance to prepare. And what were they doing? Sleeping in. Right. Which is why we, every year at Shavuot, we do the repair. We stay up all night, lest we fall asleep. Okay? Anyway, so, yes, the people were asleep. And when God descended upon Mount Sinai, Moses betook himself to the encampment and awakened them with these words, "Arise from your sleep. The bridegroom is at hand and is waiting to lead his bride under the marriage canopy." And of course, Shavuot is likened to a wedding ceremony, right? The Torah itself is the ketubah, it's the contract. We are the bride, God is the groom. Change up the gender however way you like, but that's the idea, that the Torah is the ketubah, and that we are under the chuppah. Moses, at the head of the procession, hereupon brought the nation to its bridegroom, God to Sinai himself going up the mountain. He said to God, "Announce your words, your children are ready to obey them." These words of Moses rang near and far, and on this occasion his voice, when he repeated the words of God to the people, has had as much power as the divine voice that he heard. And the people accepted. The people accepted Torah. Hardly had they uttered these words of submission to God when 120 myriads of angels descended and provided every Israelite with a crown and a girdle of glory, divine gifts, which they did not lose until they worshiped the golden calf, when the angels came and took the gifts away from them. At the same time, these crowns and girdles of glory, a heavenly radiance, was shed over their faces, but this also they later lost through their transgressions. Only Moses retained it, whose face shone so brightly that if even today a crack were to be made in his tomb, the light emanating from his corpse would be so powerful that it could not but destroy all the world. By the way, this is the linguistic background between the notion that Jews have horns. The Torah says that Moses radiated this keren or, this ray of light, right? But a ray is also, can also be a horn, but they misspelled or, which of course is light, but or is also skin. So this idea of skin made out of horns is based on a mistranslation from this notion of how radiant Moses was from these direct encounters with the divine. After God had bestowed upon Israel these wonderful gifts, he wanted to proceed to the announcement of Torah, but did not desire to do so while Moses was with him, that the people might not say it was that the people might not say it was Moses who had spoken out of the cloud. That doesn't make sense. There's so many typos in this. The idea is that people shouldn't be able to say that it was Moses that spoke out of the cloud. Moses had to be away from it so that everybody knew that God was the one who had spoken out of the cloud. He sought an excuse to be rid of him. And God therefore said to Moses, "Go down, warn the people that they should not press forward to see, for if even one of them were to be destroyed, the loss to me would be as great as if all creation had been destroyed." Now be clear, bid Nadav and Avihu also, as well as the firstborn that are to perform the priestly duties, beware that they do not press forward. Now this is really interesting. If you're aware of the story of Nadav and Avihu, they are the first two sons of Aaron, and they sort of stretched the boundaries of what it was they were supposed to do with the priesthood, and they basically went out of bounds, and they were zapped, right? So this is really an interesting midrash of the rabbis, understanding that they were already sort of singled out as sort of troublemakers. God sees this happening and says, warn them, right? Make sure you warn them now. But clearly they did not listen. So warn Nadav and Avihu as well as the firstborn that are to perform the priestly duties, beware that they do not press forward. Moses, however, desirous of remaining with God, replied, "I've already warned the people and set the bounds beyond which they may not venture." God thereupon said to Moses, "Go, descend and call upon Aaron to come up with you, but make sure he stays behind you while the people do not move beyond the positions that you have assigned them." Hardly had Moses left the mountain when God revealed the Torah to the people. The heavens opened, and Mount Sinai, freed from the earth, rose into the air, so that its summit towered into the heavens, while a thick cloud covered the sides of it and touched the feet of the divine throne. Accompanying God on one side appeared 22,000 angels with crowns for the Levites, the only tribe that remained true to God while the rest worshiped the golden calf. And on the second side were 60 myriads, 3,550 angels, each bearing a crown of fire for each individual Israelite. And double this number of angels was on the third side, whereas on the fourth side they were simply innumerable. For God did not appear from one direction, but from all four simultaneously, which, however, did not prevent God's glory from filling the heaven as well as all the earth. And in spite of all these innumerable hosts of angels, there was no crowding on Mount Sinai, no mob. There was room for all the angels that had appeared in honor of Israel and the Torah. They had, however, at the same time, received the order to destroy Israel in case they intended to reject the Torah. I'd like to end by offering a poem by my colleague Rain Zohav. She wrote this in honor of Shavuot. Lightning crashes, like crashing egos, like crashing cymbals, where we saw the thunder and heard the lightning on Mount Sinai, as flowers bloomed, where Moses stepped, bringing the word of God, a word of God, a word of, a word, an aleph, silent, except for the crashing of lightning. What did you hear? Chag Sameach. So as this is Erev Shavuot, that means today is the 49th and last day of the Omer. And so we can turn to page 278. As we count the Omer, we're reminded of the importance of counting each day of our lives and of striving to make each day count. Thus can we give meaning to the prayer of the psalmist, teach us to count our days so that we may acquire a heart of wisdom. We're about to fulfill the mitzvah of counting the Omer, as it is written in the Torah. You shall count from the day following the day of rest, from the day that you brought an omer of grain as an offering. 7 full weeks shall be counted. You shall count 50 days to the day following the 7th week. Today is the 49th day of the Omer. So join me in the bracha, the very last day. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sfirat ha'omer. Our praise to you, Adonai, sovereign of all, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to count the Omer. Hayom tisha ve'arba'im yom shehem shiva shavuot la'omer. Today is the 49th day, which is 7 weeks of the Omer. So let's rise and cast our gaze to the day that we pray for, when we are all healed and the world is one and God's name is one. Repeat after me. Yeah. V'hashevota el levavecha ki Adonai hu ha'Elohim v'hashevota el levavecha ki Adonai hu ha'Elohim v'nemar v'haya Adonai v'melech kol haaretz bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo Yeah, we sounded good, didn't we? All of us. We now turn our attention to those who we've loved and lost, those who gave us life, who walked with us, taught us, loved us, but who no longer walk this earth. Mourners Kaddish on page 294. You may be seated unless it's your custom to remain standing for the Mourners Kaddish. This week we are remembering Joanne Kaminer, my mother-in-law Miriam Kushner, Beatrice Meltzer, Estelle Siegel, Sandra Silver, Nathan Trackman. Is there anybody else who is observing Yahrzeit or in their year of mourning or just remembering? Page 294. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
Ve'alma divrach cherutei ve'amlich malchutei. V'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael. B'agala u'bizman kariv v'imru.
Amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam olamei. Amen.
Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmei dekudisha brichu. Leila min kol birchata b'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran v'yalma v'imru. Amen. Yehi shlama Rabba min shamaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu Yisrael ve'imru. Amen.
All right, now everybody sit. All right, so this is the first Shabbat of LGBTQ month. What is it called? What Rainbow month? What's
Yes.
It's Gay Pride. Gay
Gay
Pride
Pride.
month. That's the official
it.
name.
Yep.
So I wanted to share some big news from a colleague of mine, Rabbi Fred Gutman, who shares about his daughter Beth-El and her wife Netta, who are both Israelis, who married in the United States. They took to court and won a very big case yesterday in Israel. Actually, now it would have been the day before yesterday, against the Israeli government. The government now recognizes both of them as their two boys' parents. Beth-El is the birth mother, but this is the first time they are doing so for an LGBTQ family based on a foreign birth certificate and not needing to go through adoption. That they're just recognizing this birth certificate that these two women are both of their parents rather than having to force an adoption. So now Netta is recognized, and future families that move to Israel do not have to go through the adoption process, which is beautiful and wonderful. And we got to be proud of Israel for certainly no other countries in the Middle East doing that, that's for sure. And which is actually really beautiful because when I was at the mikveh last, creating a couple new Jews, which is always a wonderful thing to do, the colleagues that were on the Beit Din with me, when we all form a Beit Din, if I have somebody, I bring them, and if they have somebody, so since we're there at the mikveh, we do a bunch. And my colleague was bringing to the mikveh a 10-day-old baby boy. He had just, had his bris 3 days earlier. He was born of a surrogate, of a non-Jewish woman, a surrogate to two Israeli gay fathers, right? And the entire family flew in from Israel for this. For the birth, they knew that it was about the birth and the Brit Milah, and it was hysterical because as my candidate came from the hallway into the waiting room where they were all waiting, they started bursting out in song, singing Simon Tov and Mazel Tov, and throwing candy at her. She did not expect this at all, but
nice.
That's the way you do it in Israel, right?
Fun.
It is not tame. It's a beautiful thing. Anyway, so a couple of announcements. Those were not our announcements, but those are good and welfare announcements. So you already heard about our Tikkun Leil Shavuot, our all-night cross-country. That's tomorrow night, starting at 8. I am teaching on, did I say that here? So I'm going to be teaching on the bedtime Shema. And you may or may not be familiar with this blessing because it's actually been excised from the Reform prayer book. And the prayer that I'm teaching on was actually removed from the conservative prayer book too. It's in the Orthodox, both Sephardi and Ashkenazi, but it, in Hebrew, talks about reincarnation and angels and what it is that we might do at the end of each day to clear our conscience as a mini teshuvah practice. So I'm going to be teaching on that text, which not a lot of people come by, but it's a fascinating text. Anyway, that's what I'm teaching on. Lots of other stuff too. We talked about the ice cream social. Oops, I forgot to say we knew. Never mind. We're going back to masks. Oops. And the flowers on the bima are in memory of Estelle Siegel from her daughters, Susan and Adrian. Thank you very much. And wave to everybody in YouTube. And we want to thank Ben Ackman for helping Seth out last weekend on the live streaming. Anybody else want to join the tech crew? I know we will, and especially Seth will appreciate it. Of course, next Saturday night, be there or be square. It is borscht for the first time in 3 years. We are going to be celebrating. It is also our birthday party. It is our 150th birthday party. Shame on you if you don't come. So how often do you belong to a synagogue that's 150 years old, right? What? It's borscht and our 150th birthday party. Absolutely. Tell all your friends. Oneg, thank you, Seth Lieberman, member of the Board of Trustee and Youth Education Committee, and most important, Jonah and Gabriel's dad. And if you are interested in sponsoring an Oneg or our wine and cheese pre-neg, let the office know. It's all on the website. Our next wine and cheese pre-neg is on June 17th. World Refugee Day Festival will take place on our lawn Sunday, June 19th. Yes, that's Father's Day, 2 to 5, rain or shine at Temple Beth-El. Next Hot Shabbat's June 25th. And change the world one meal at a time with an hour of your week. Help feed the hungry and homeless at our food pantry. All the information you need to either show up or donate food or funds is all on the website. Mostly have a fabulous Shabbat Shalom and Hag Sameach. Anybody else have any announcements? Good and welfare? We are enough. So we're going to close up with Adon Olam on 321.
Adon Olam,
Adon Olam,
Asher Malach,
Asher Malach,
B'terem Kol,
B'terem Kol,
Yitzir Nivra,
Yitzir Nivra,
Le'et Natzav,
Le'et Nasav,
V'chefso Kol, Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam, Ve'acharei Kechlon Tzchakot, Levado Yiloch Nora Adon Olam, V'hu Haya, V'hu Hove, V'hu Yeh B'tifara Adon Olam, Adon Olam,
Adon Olam,
Asher Malach,
Asher Malach,
B'terem Kol,
B'terem Kol,
Yitzir Nivra,
Yitzir Nivra,
Le'et Natzav,
Le'et Nasav,
V'chefso Kol, Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam, V'hu Echad Ve'ein Sheni, L'ham Shelo L'hachbira Adon Olam, V'li Reshit, V'li Tachlit, V'lo Ha'oz V'hamizra Adon Olam, Adon Olam,
Adon Olam,
Asher Malach, Asher Malach,
B'terem Kol,
B'terem Kol,
Yitzir Nivra,
Yitzir Nivra,
Le'et Nasav,
Le'et Nasav,
V'chefso
Kol,
Kol,
Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam,
V'hu Eli, V'chai Goli, V'tzor Chevli V'ritzara Adon Olam, V'hu Nisi, Umanosli, Menat Kosi B'yom Ekra Adon Olam, Adon Olam,
Adon Olam,
Asher Malach,
Asher Malach,
B'terem Kol,
B'terem Kol,
Yitzir Nivra,
Yitzir Nivra,
Le'et Nasav,
Le'et Nasav,
V'chefso Kol, Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam.
בידו הפקיד רוחי, והייתי שם
ואירה אדון עולם.
ואם רוחי כביאתי,
אדון עלי ולא אירה אדון עולם. אדון עולם.
אדון עולם,
אשר מלך
אשר מלך,
בטרם כל,
בטרם כל,
יציר נברא,
יציר נברא,
לעת נשא,
לעת נשא,
לחפצו
כל
כל,
אזי
אזי מלך
שמו נקרא
אדון עולם.
Thank you, Seth, for feeding us our Jewish soul food. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. So good to see you. We were worried about you. No? Are you doing the gluten thing now too? Are you doing the gluten thing now too? No. Yeah, me too, but on Shabbat.